Hi, I'm Robert Strand, Executive Director of the Center for Responsible Business. Each semester we partner with business and thought leaders to bring a series of events around topics of corporate responsibility and sustainability to UC Berkeley. I'm here with Paul Rice, who is the President and CEO of Fair Trade USA and was one of our panelists for today's Peterson Series event. Paul, welcome. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Robert. Pleasure to be here.
Fair Trade USA is the leading third-party certifier in the U.S. And you've developed this certification yourself and have been there from the very beginning. What sorts of companies are choosing to use Fair Trade USA?
We started with food and have been working for most of our 17-year history with great food brands in the coffee and tea and fresh produce sectors. We work with great retailers like Whole Foods and Costco and Sam's Club, Trader Joe's. Working to certify and ensure a more sustainable supply chain for the farmers and workers that bring us the great foods that we eat. And more recently, we have started to work in the manufacturing sector. So we just started certifying apparel a few years ago, working with some pioneering brands like PACT and Prana, and now with Patagonia, and looking to do more in the manufactured sector with Williams-Sonoma and West Elm.
Do you see that draw from industry coming to you and asking about how to engage with fair trade? Or is it primarily you pushing and knocking on their doors?
We're really scrambling to catch up with the rapidly growing demand across all kinds of industries for fair trade. And I think it speaks to the failure of some of the historic approaches. I think historically, a lot of companies relied on factory monitoring, for example, in the manufacturing sector to ensure that working conditions were safe and that decent wages were being paid in the factories around the world that they were sourcing from. But of course, with tragedies in the last couple of years, factory fires, factories collapsing, thousands of workers being killed, I think brands are increasingly realizing that sending an auditor into a factory 2 days a year doesn't really give you a clear picture of what's actually going on. And that if you want to know what's going on, and if you want to have a safe, reliable, stable supply chain, you need to engage. You need to engage the factory workers, you need to engage the owners, and you need to provide an economic model that supports more sustainable practices. That's what fair trade is trying to do. It's trying to create an economic context for supporting sustainability.
So do you see this, is this a new wave of capitalism in your view?
Well, I'm so glad you said that. Because that's what I believe. I look at what globalization was all about 10, 20, 30 years ago, and Joe Stiglitz and others have characterized it as the race to the bottom. Mm-hmm. U.S. companies going abroad in search of cheap labor and low environmental standards so that they could lower cost of goods and bring us cheap crap. Today, I believe, and I see leading minds in industry actually rethinking that logic and realizing that an insecure supply chain is an insecure business. And that to the extent that they can stabilize and secure their supply chains, they can ensure long-term access to the right quantity and quality and price. And so, we see great coffee companies realizing coffee quality comes from farmers. If farmers are starving, you're not going to get quality. So you got to invest in the farmer, which means transparency, which means peeling back the supply chain, peeling back the curtain and actually knowing who the farmer is that's supplying your coffee. Same with apparel factories. We heard today on today's panel, so many apparel companies don't even know where they're sourcing from, right? Because they're buying through importers or brokers and the supply chain is not transparent. So the first step is to create more transparency in the supply chain. And the second step is to build a partnership, to build a bridge and a shared value proposition in which both sides win.